Hi, I'm Chris Jansen, and I'm here with great bassist Jeff Berlin. Jeff, how did you get started playing the bass?
I was a violinist originally. I started in 1958, played violin. My father guided me towards a musical education, and there was always classical music in the house, and they thought I had a gift for music, so they gave me lessons, and I played violin a good 10 years. I'm trained, I'm a orchestra violinist by nature, and I've played a lot of serious music, classical music over the years, and studied quite religiously, and one day gave it up for electric bass. I just decided I didn't want to play violin anymore.
How old were you?
I played violin till I was 16, but I got my first electric bass when I was 14, which was in 1967. I got my first electric bass. I sold newspapers, earned some money.
Yeah, that's great.
Went down to Barrow's Music on Middle Neck Road in Great Neck, New York, and it's not there anymore. Yeah. And I bought the bass, and I was a bass player from 14 on.
Wow, that's fantastic. So delivering papers bought the bass.
Newspapers bought me my bass because I started things and quit things, and my parents weren't entirely into me becoming a bass player. Yeah. I tried to be a drummer. They didn't like the fact that there would be noise in the house, so they kind of vetoed that.
Right.
And I got the bass because violin is tuned G, D, A, and E,
right,
but from low to high. And I thought a bass, in those days all we had were 4 strings, and pretty much. And right. I thought it was a 4-string instrument tuned with the same notes as a violin had. And I thought it couldn't be that hard for me to learn, so I got myself an electric bass and proceeded to play it and practice it.
Yeah, and so about what age did you get into playing jazz? And even before you were playing jazz, who were some of your early influences, I mean, that you really looked up to
on electric bass? Jack Bruce.
Jack Bruce. Hands
down for me, even to this day. Jack is the only guy that makes me nervous when I know he's there when I play. One time we did a gig in Germany, and he came in, sat front row, folded his arms, and looked up at me, and I was a goner. I mean, it was end of story because he holds a very special place for me, and I am deeply a fan. You know, we know each other, we're friends, but his bass playing in Cream was revolutionary, and the early Cream albums, the live ones, were those special moments where Eric playing the blues left a lot of tonal room for Jack to change the root. Often he was the first bass player that did not play a root certain times, and he's also, I think, the first virtuoso bass player in history. So as a bass player, really, in rock, it was Jack Bruce, hands down. Yeah. Tim Bogert too. Tim Bogert too, the break song they did on Near the Beginning record was like real influential for me. And I knew Tim, and I would play a solo for him sometimes. I mean, Tim was important to me. And I stayed on that till I got about 19 or so when I went up north to study at Berklee, and then I became a very converted, into jazz. I was a jazz musician and still am.
Were there any records that really, I mean, had profound influence on you at Berklee that you said, oh boy, jazz, this is what I've got to do?
There were 2 records. It's funny you should ask that. One was a Joe Pass album, and I don't remember the name. I was at one of the guys' house, and I heard this sort of...
Right.
And I said, this guy sounds incredible. What is this?
Yeah, right.
And
those Joe Pass records had that effect on a lot of us.
On a lot of people.
Yeah, what is this?
What is this? This remarkable linear, guitar playing. Right. So as a bass player, I didn't hear these things, and I wanted to know about them. Right. Another one, interestingly, was Gary Burton. I think it was Throb he had done, or A Genuine Tongue Funeral. I had heard Gary, and then he was teaching up there, and I saw him playing in ensembles at Berklee, and I was deeply, deeply moved by the brilliance of this guy. Even to today, I mean, I still regard Gary as maybe one of the greatest jazz musicians in the world. Yeah. He's mostly retired. I think he doesn't want to keep playing. I don't know what his future plans might be, but it's a loss to me because I want this guy to keep playing. I mean, so Gary was very important to me in those days too.
And through all of this, I mean, despite certain trends and developments in electric bass technology, we should say you have remained true to the 4-string fretted bass.
Right.
Talk about that for a little while.
Well, there is a thing with me that I'm very conscious to avoid, and that's bass cliches. And I have probably cause more angst among bassists because I will state that I believe that certain things we do as musicians, as bass players, and the way we play and the way we perform, the equipment we use, the style we use is kind of cliche oriented. And I've noticed that drummers in general, don't have, let's say, cliche oriented drum licks. Some licks are there, some guitar licks, but bass players, generally speaking, usually sound the same. Generally speaking.
Gotcha.
I stuck on 4 strings because I didn't want to go to 5 or 6 because it's not only I believe, I know you don't play better on more strings. You play better with more knowledge of music and more understanding of music. So I stuck on 4 strings because this to me, and I've used this word in clinics, this is the universe to me. I have to find ways to traverse this neck. You're a guitar player and you know this.
Right.
You play jazz, you want to find ways. If you have a 7 or 8 or 9 string, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll play better. In fact, it might hinder what you can do. You usually do better in a limited area than you do in an expanded one, because you have to use more of what you have. So I stuck with 4 strings, and I also will not play, in fact, I'll never play an active bass.
Yeah.
It's a personal decision. The active instrument to me is a little bit dry sounding, a little bit brittle sounding.
Right.
I don't particularly feel in this day of modern amplification and super PA systems,
Right.
and 100% gear-oriented, fine, superior recording studios, that I need also to boost high end out of my instrument and sort of crunch the sound.
Yeah.
So I stuck with passive 4 strings. This is an instrument called a Jeff Berlin bass.
It's a nice title.
Nice title. I came up with it, this one.
Yeah, well, your parents
They came up with it.
That's right.
Just before the bass, the violin lessons.
Yeah.
So I play a Jeff Berlin. It's made by Dean Guitars. I don't believe they make this bass anymore. And probably because the bass didn't do as well because of the fact that it was 4-string and it wasn't active.
It was passive.
It was passive, and I stuck, pretty much to the same equipment that I've used forever. I have a badass bass bridge, which was an innovation by the guy who pretty well single-handedly invented the parts industry, Glenn Kwan from Leo Kwan Badass Bass Bridges. He's the singular guy who invented the entire replacement industry. People ought to know that.
Yeah.
And one of his, I guess, people who worked with him was Bill Bartolini in the early days, and Bill Bartolini wired these pickups for me. And Bill is, I would call him like a medium-sized, impactful company, in that he caters really to specific sort of, appreciators of what he does. And these are Carl Thompson bass strings, which I've been using since the 1970s. I mean, I had the good fortune, they would offer me strings in different, ways, and over the years, would you like to try our strings and have an endorsement? But I've never seemed to find any string that seems to have this sound. These strings are very glorious to me. So Carl Thompson's, and those amps, those Mark bass amps. I mean, they're the greatest bass amp I've ever found. I think they're the most musical amp I've ever found, and the tone is exquisite. And I live for tone, so that's what makes it for me.
A lot of my bass player friends have told me sometimes, Berlin, he sounds like he's playing a fretless some of the time.
Right.
But clearly, you've always played fretted instruments. Why do people say that, or why would they think? Does it have something to do with your slurring technique, or your vibrato, or what?
It's my slurring technique and my vibrato.
All right. Tell us about this.
You combine these things. I've always liked to stick with frets. I don't like to play fretless. In fact, again, as a bold statement, I'll never play a fretless bass.
Right.
I will never play one. It's my ear, my statement. It's a little bit of a bass cliche to use a sound that was pioneered and pretty well presented entirely as a fully formed concept by Jaco.
Right.
So I would prefer, since no fretted bass player has defined the sound of a fretted instrument, I felt that there was room here to find something that might be unique. Okay? The fretless bass, to me, in my ear, in my statement, I'm speaking for myself, is already defined. And I really, I'm afraid, and I think that we bass players sort of go in a way of what is sort of easier to do sometimes, and this thing was done, this sound was presented, well, let me try to do these sounds. And I'm sort of the mind that I would prefer to go in a place that people, that I haven't been able to do well in and work it out. It's like, deny me this person's sound, deny me this person's amps, deny me this person's contribution to music. Now what am I going to come up with? So the fretless sound, I suppose, is the fact that I never liked basses that sometimes have like this sort of, that fretted
yeah, right,
sound.
the fretted sound.
And I wanted to avoid that.
Yeah, because really you have to hear the sound that you want before you can execute it. Don't you agree? I mean,
Yeah, and it develops side by side. Sometimes people have the ideas like, how do I develop a style? And often by developing a style is as simple as changing this cable for another one, or moving your amp, off to the right a foot. And the reason is because any change is a motion, is towards something. So as a matter of change, I started to study music that was not bass oriented, more the sax, the Gary Burtons, the Sonny Rollins, the Pat Martinos.
The Pat Martinos, right.
And I would try to play where I would play stuff that wasn't fretted. And by doing this, hopefully it had more of a sweet legato-ish, a melodic element to it. And that was sort of with the fretless thing. Sometimes I would bend things where I could play instead of playing. I might, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but.
Great thing for a student, though, to maybe catch on, get an idea for an exercise to practice, bending intervals on the bass.
It would be nice if they knew the notes first.
Yeah.
See what I mean? It's like the technical end of music and the technical end of instrumentation has often been way overemphasized instead of what is a minor chord. So I often tell people, don't worry about the technique, don't worry about the hands, don't worry about the chops, because a lot of guys do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I'll say, worry about minor, worry about major, worry about inversions, worry about tonality.
Tonality. Well, and you'd mentioned, we were talking earlier today, and one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, what impact have guitarists had on you? Guitarists really were kind of just soloing on fretted, obviously, instrument.
Correct.
In combo, small group, Joe Pass, Charlie Christian, Wes Montgomery, if we're going through the history of the guitar, the guitar has evolved as a solo instrument probably a little quicker than the bass. So how much have you listened to guitarists?
A great deal. Guitar is a meaningful instrument for a bass player to regard if they want to learn about soloing, because you have to look at what is the nature of that instrument, and the nature of my instrument is to play parts. That's the nature of what I do.
Yeah.
But what happens is if I want to stretch out Tubby the tuba style, where I want to play the melody, bass players sort of, in general, again, I emphasize, is that we're limited. We really are not the most capable melodists and in the family of instruments. We're really not the most capable harmonists. We don't really deal with those things. I'll play an F and the pianist will play a dense cluster of tonality on top. Right. My interest is what are the notes in those two chord sounds that he's making. Yeah. So the guitar players had, for me, because of the fact that they had to solo. As a guitarist, unless you're pretty much Elvis on acoustic, you have to solo. You must play melody. And so I discovered that the guitarists in jazz, not even the blues, because that's fairly a common sound and it's kind of a doable thing, but the jazz guitarists always dealt in harmony and tonality. So the Joe Pass, the John Scofields, I transcribed him recently. He was an old buddy of mine.
So you're still transcribing. You're an advocate of transcription.
Yes, because when I transcribe, there's three benefits to it. One, I've used my ear.
Your ear, correct, yeah.
Two, I've seen the harmony and it's in front of you and you can see and understand what it is that they were sort of instinctually doing. Right. And the third benefit is here. Yeah. Because I have to play these things. I have to find these lines on the instrument. So transcription, people often ask this sort of, it's kind of a sweet, slightly naive question, which is, what is the best thing to practice?
Right. Yeah.
And it's kind of an innocent question because it seems that a lot of guys don't want to do the whole gamut of what it takes to be a good, musician. Right. if you want to know the best thing, you know the answer to this already, but I'll say it for the camera. The best thing any musician can do in regards to getting better is to transcribe a better player than yourself.
Exactly.
Exactly. You know this.
Yeah.
And there is a meaning in this. There's lines and harmonies that I've never thought of.
And put yourself on the bandstand with players that are better than you also.
Yes, if you can do that and if they'll allow you while you're in that area, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you can do well, like as a musician, you can do well dealing with, let's say, like-minded musicians seeking the same things you're seeking.
Right.
That's sort of a focus and an idea that I have always endeavored to do, you know, as a younger musician. I would meet a guy and say, well, I don't know how to solo that well, and I'm just getting into jazz. And he'll say, well, I'm working on my comping, and I'm not very good at it. Well,
let's play together.
Let's play.
Right.
And when you're dealing with like-minded people, you will grow. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. I learned when I was at Berklee back in 1972, an interesting point in history happened. There was two enclaves of great musicians. In Boston, there was there was Mike Stern,
right.
There was Vinnie Colaiuta, there was Steve Smith, there was Neil Steubenhaus, there was Abe Laboriel, there was Gary Burton was there, Pat Metheny was there.
Some players.
Gosh, there were some other, I mean, there's so many more. At the same time down south around Miami, Jaco Pastorius was there, Pat Metheny was down there, Gil Goldstein was down there, Mark Egan was down there.
Right.
T. Lavitz, Danny Gottlieb was down there, my buddy Danny, our buddy Danny.
Yeah, exactly.
And we
Hiram Bullock, I think, was down there too.
Hiram Bullock was there.
Yeah.
There were these two enclaves right at the same time in history, and I got lucky to stumble into one of them.
Yeah.
And what I discovered is that these guys were better than me because all I wanted to do was, do Jack, You know, Jack Bruce was the guy.
Yeah, right.
I went up to Boston. I said, I'll be a bass player like Jack. And these guys said, well, there's other things to listen to. So I looked up to these guys, and they turned me around into pursue, let's say, other musics.
Jeff, I think it's fair to say for this project, especially the concert part of this, I mean, you put together an all-star group. You know, Dennis Chambers on drums, the great Pat Martino on guitar, Richard Drexler on piano. I mean, this is a great group. What do you like about each of their playing?
I like the fact that each of them does something that I don't do. And I like the fact that we're all in agreement in regards to, let's say, a time element in music. This is a brilliant day of music for me, and one of the elements about it that I want people to notice when they watch this is none of this was rehearsed.
Right.
And none of this was prepared. You want to do this, you want to do that, you want to do that, you want to do this. Hit the record button. And why that's so special is because you will see mistakes, and the mistakes to me are sort of a terror element with a lot of musicians.
Right, yeah.
If they make them, it freaks them out.
Right.
And I wanted sort of, I have the Players School of Music, and in it I tell guys, you're going to make mistakes, don't avoid it. Yeah. Just take the mistake and fix it. So what this raw interaction was a chance to play whatever came, did come, whatever happened, did occur. And as musicians making those mistakes and those errors, it was made in the name of creativity. Yeah. And by having that creativity, you're going to find beautiful things in that. So I kind of want that to stand. Yeah. That there is a real meaning in that kind of interaction. And this is the most raw thing I think I've ever done in regards to a record or video or anything that I've permitted to be shown. And Pat Martino is somebody that I played with since 1975. Right. And he is a legendary and a great, great guitar player. And he had influence on me. So he was kind of a person. Beautiful guy. Yeah. Came down to play. Dennis is somebody, we've known each other for many years. We had never played together. We talked about it. We just did one record recently with, T. Lavitz. We did a record. And we wanted to do something else, so we did this. And Richard Drexler and I have been touring, forever together in a trio with Danny Gottlieb, now with Paul Wertico. So there's a little individual relationship I have with everybody. And what a wonderful opportunity to come out and just simply stand up and do it. Yeah. Come what may.
Yeah. Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful music. Yeah. And I know you're a big advocate of education. You opened the Players School. What year was this?
I don't recall, about 8 years ago. My son had cancer. He's cancer-free. And
wonderful.
we started the school in order to, I quit playing. I retired.
Right.
The bass was hung up, and my wife and I stayed home, and we cared for our son, who, when he was declared cured after 5 years, and his health is back, and he's 13 now, Jason, and he took on his own life, you know, as a young teenage boy. Everything is fine. I began to play again, and so I was gone for almost a decade, and came back, and now I'm starting to play and tour again. At the same time, I kept the Players School. I started the Players School to make a living.
To make a living.
Because I wasn't playing. I wasn't a musician. I was a teacher. I was a school marm.
Right.
You know? And so I kept the Players School, but the beautiful thing that I'm so proud of is we almost get 100% improvement. The guys that come have to play music, harmony, meaningful music, drums, bass, keyboards, guitar, music of meaning. Music and meaning means like tonality. You know, E major has a name. You know, and these things are not known to people. If a musician understands tonality, he can then improve his way as a player in any way.
So what should a student look for in a good teacher?
Well, it's a little bit of a hard answer, because if I don't know how to cook, how do I really know that the teacher who is going to teach me to cook knows what they're doing? Right. In general, the way that I would answer that is that if you go to a guitar teacher and they ask that question, what do you want to work on today? The reason they're doing it, and it's not a bad statement to these teachers, but they want to make a living. So I don't want you to leave. I want to make money from you. What do you want to work on?
What do you want to do?
And I'm sort of the mind that, look, I appreciate you coming to me. Let me hear you play. Okay, this is what I want you to do. You don't want to do it? I thank you, but you got to go. Because I'm not going to allow, in sort of academic situations, how I'm going to, what's the word, compromise that. Art is compromisable. You can do anything you want in art. In education, you can't. And to prove that, look at every doctor and every lawyer that graduated out of Cornell. I mean, they followed the text, they followed the thing, and they got their license, and they can practice law or medicine. And in musicians, you go to there's plenty of places, you know, schools where it's sort of motivated by, let's say, rock education, and they have guys coming out of school and more or less going right back home and more or less picking up at the same gigs they did, you know, before they went out of town to go study. And so as a nature of things in academia, I say, let me hear you play. This is what I want you to learn. Yeah, having a direction. Probably a good thing for students to look at too is how do that teacher's other students sound? That's an interesting point. And I'll add to that, if this student is an excellent student and this next student is not, it's hard to know. I know of, there's the greatest music teacher that I know of is Charlie Banakis. It's great. You know who he is. Yeah. And I'm proud to say his name. I don't know him personally, but I know the legend precedes him. The legend precedes him wonderful. Because he is a guy who is truly 100% dedicated, and the meaning of his lessons are undeniable. Right. The information. Charlie will have students that are excellent students. Charlie will have students that are not so good. Yes, that's right. Mike Stern studies with him. I still study with him. Big jurist, right? Yeah, takes a lesson. My guitar teacher at the Players School, Peter Mangaya, just started to study with him. Peter, he's studying with him. Great. And there are students that he has that are not so great. So it's hard to determine. You really have to go by the word and the rep and of the teacher himself or herself. And so I've discovered that it'll take me a minute to know if I have a good teacher or not. If the teacher sits there and instantly says something that pricks my interest and gets me to think, then I say that's the teacher. Like Chuck Owen over here at USF. Great teacher. A great teacher. Well, I studied with Chuck. You studied with Chuck. Wonderful. Yeah, Jack Wilkins also over at USF. Did you? Okay. Great teachers. I went to Chuck the other day for the first time, and he gave me one assignment because he's busy, I'm busy, and I think now he's what is he, the head of the International Jazz Educators or something? Yeah, he's going to be the new president of IAJE. Okay, and he squeezed me in. We're in 2006 now. I think he goes in the office in July, something like that. Yeah. He gave me a lesson, and the lesson that he gave me was like unique to me, and it made me excited. That's my teacher. That's my teacher. Yeah, he's right there. Yeah. He showed me something that I didn't know. That's my teacher.
Yeah.
I don't need to pay a guy to learn Stairway to Heaven.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. Strangest gig you've ever played?
Today?
Really?
Well, it's strange because the unpredictability of any gig that you would undertake has got to be strange. I don't think I've ever had anything that borders on the utterly bizarre. I mean, there's a few stories I know about a few named guys I won't discuss here. But as strange goes, here we are in a studio, having never played together, performing for a public, a purchasing public, functioning in a sonic environment without monitors, kind of looking at each other for endings, wondering when and what is going to happen at what time. This kind of is pretty high up there. Strange to me doesn't mean non-musical, it just means slightly tuggy, you know. I did the Yes gig for a while, and I got a call on a Sunday night, and Wednesday I was on stage with them. Because I transcribed their solos and stuff, so that was kind of considered strange, but I've been transcribing for years, like you. You know, we've been transcribing for years, so sometimes people are amazed you write out these Yes tunes, but it's nothing. It's like E minor, and then, you know, and these lines are part of rock folklore already. These are famous bass lines, so I know these, and I don't know. I can't say I've had too many strange gigs. We played some weird places. You know, we played like in dungeons and castles in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, right.
That was kind of strange, I suppose. I mean, we played once in Frankfurt, Germany, and the pianist's foot almost caught fire because it was so hot that the rubber tarmac, Richard I'm talking about, was so hot that we were all in the shade kind of hiding out, Danny Gottlieb and I, and Richard's foot almost started to burn through his shoe, you know. So he's pulling his foot and still trying to solo, you know.
Get it in the shade.
So yeah, so that's kind of strange. I mean, frankly, it's not too many things that have happened that really are going to warrant, let's say, a Saturday night movie, you know. It's nothing that weird.
It's an interesting business.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you and getting inside your, your thoughts about music. I know this is just one function of the DVD, and I think that you've given me and the students who are watching this some invaluable information.
That's great. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.